Okay. Right. There's no need for this audience to understand the importance of, be told the importance of salmon aquaculture, nor the importance of wild salmonids in European coastal ecosystems, and nor the role that salmon lice play in linking the impact of the one on the other. So I'll get straight into it and describe here a structure that we're using to look at combining a model of salmon lice from the production of norpuli at the one end to the impact on hosts of the adult lice on those hosts, combined with the smolt model consisting of 3 steps from the smolts entering the sea to the smolts leaving the coastal system. So I'll run through all these steps one by one. The first step is the production of norpuli. This is the lice from farms. We do have decent data on lice per fish with the adult counts available daily. The number of fish, we have much less data available and have to make estimates at times. Egg production rate, we're assuming 30 per day per ovigerous female, and we're assuming 100% of them hatch, which is not appropriate at low salinity, but is reasonable in full-strength seawater. And this part of the system is of course, subject to direct control through a range of treatments that can be implemented on lice numbers on farms that will be discussed by other people. So you've got the second step is your Copepodid, your infectious pressure distribution. The norpuli take about 40 days to mature, has been mentioned, so it's 4 days at 10 degrees centigrade, during which time there is mortality. We have 38% survival at over 4 days, and these Copepodids then survive for an average of 4.2 days. Details are in modeling that I'll later, but anyway, this results in an average of 48 Copepodids per ovigerous female as our infection pressure, which are distributed by the movement of water. Now, larval lice do move. They have some limited swimming, which can be important, but the basic process of movement are down to hydrodynamics. And ideally, we want to use full hydrodynamic models, often we do, but these are computationally intensive, and the local validation is difficult, and as Mike just pointed out, there are a lot of uncertainties. So to satisfy nobody, I'm going to use a kernel model just to describe this basic structure where the decay in Copepodid numbers and hence infection risk decays with distance from farm. The result is a concentration which is expressed as Copepodids per meter squared for historical reasons, really. Okay, so you've got your concentration. You don't have your contact between the lice and the host. The salmon smolts contact lice while they're swimming through the water, and lice respond to the presence of the smolt by swimming towards it. So essentially, we've created a model which describes this, which is a cylinder within a cylinder. And this depends upon the smolt, its volume, length, and radius, and the speed at which it swims through the water, and also on the louse, specifically the speed at which it swims towards the fish, and the duration of the time at which it responds to the signal for passing of the fish. So we then have to multiply this contact rate by the concentration, which has to be divided by a depth factor of Z, which is the depth of which the bulk of the lice are distributed. And then to make a concentration per meter cubed, and then of course there's all sorts of conversion of units because some things have been dealt with in centimeters per second and others in meters squared per day. But anyway, that's straightforward. And then having got this concentration, this contact, is a probability of attachment, which we're assuming is 0.5 per day. And so this gives a simulated infection rate of the formula described there, which is described in Murray and Moriarty, which was published in Ecological Modeling last year. But we're extending this modeling to include the maturation of survival of larval lice on the host, because once they attach, of course, they go through 2 calamus stages, before becoming the mobile stages, and it's the mobile stages which cause most damage to the host. We have an estimation of 35% mortality during those stages, and maturation also introduces a delay into the system, because at 10 degrees centigrade it takes about 16 days for this maturation process to occur, during which time the smolt grow. Then this is important for infection. Okay, because the impact of lice on host is dependent on the number of mobile lice being above a certain threshold. And the Norwegian traffic light system is described in this table: 0.1 lice per gram of fish, 20% mortality, 0.2, 50%, and 0.3, 100%. And our own meta-analysis of data is supportive of these types of thresholds. 0.08, 0.1 lice per gram has been associated with measurable welfare impacts, and 0.24 with 50% mortality in population. But Stephen Ives will go through that later in this conference. So the outcome that's important here is that we need to know how big the smolt is to assess how many lice it can tolerate. And that brings us on to the three-step smolt model. Smolts enter the coastal ecosystem from rivers. They're quite variable in length, but a typical smolt might be 12.5 centimeters. And we have an empirical relationship from quite a large number of observations to relate that weight, that length to a weight. So our 12.5 centimeter smolt is about 20 grams. Okay, the smolts migrate through the inshore and coastal ecosystem, swimming at about 0.4 to 3 body lengths per second. So at 1 body length per second, our 12.5 centimeter smolt swims 10.8 kilometers a day. Now, there are only a small number of lochs in Scotland that are more than 20 kilometers long. So that means most smolts can pass through these inshore waters within 1 to 2 days. But there are a few that are much longer, and there's continuing exposure in bottlenecks and around islands that where there are farms that will extend the exposure from the inshore immediate exposure. So the exposure assessments must take into account the route that smolts migrate. And the illustration is about the smolt migration from modeling by Ansley et al., which has been extended by May Moriarty. Okay, and the third part of the model is that the smolts grow. So we've taken a relationship from Morg et al. 2012, and using this relationship over a 16-day period, there's approximately a 10% growth in length. So our 12.5 centimeter smolt becomes 13.7 centimeters, and it increases from 20 to 25 grams, thereby diluting the number of lice effectively by 20%. So, okay, that's the model structure, which I know I had to rush through because there are rather a lot of individual steps which are all simple in themselves, but there's a lot of them. So into using the model structure. Well, first thing of using the model structure is to estimate the salmon lice swimming speed, which is very important for the impact of lice, very important for their contact rate. So we've just fitted with some example data from sentinel cage data in Norway, 10 lice per fish, per 55 gram fish if exposed to 1.8 lice per meter squared. And we've fitted that back into the model and back calculated that this would imply a swimming speed of 1.84 centimeters per second. Okay, that's just one set of data. We would like to recalculate that from using Scottish data to help validate the estimate, but it is also consistent with observed Copepodid swimming speeds of about 1 to 5 centimeters per second. And we just use this parameter value to investigate the model. And the main thing we're interested in is Copepodid concentration in the water that should be avoided to avoid impacts on host health. So the model is basically aiming to assess the maximum number of Copepodid days that we can tolerate for a given level of impact on hosts, and we're using the 0.1 mobile lice per gram. And so using the model, our 20 gram, 12.5 centimeter smolt, 25 gram by the time the lice are mobile, that's 2.5 mobile lice per fish, But this 2.5 mobile lice allowing for attachment and survival amounts to 7.7 infection incidents, and plugging that back into the contact formula and putting 1.84 and the specific sizes of the smolt into that, we can calculate the specific volume over which lice contact the smolt per second. And using this, the 7.7 infection incidence implies a 0.76 Copepodid per meter squared concentration for our typical smolt to avoid the lower level of impact. So there's our formula, results, for a range of different smolt sizes and different thresholds. Of course, if you multiply it, if you have a 0.2 or 0.3 thresholds per gram of fish, you simply multiply the concentration you can tolerate in the water. But a smaller smolt also can only tolerate a smaller concentration in the water per day, and a larger smolt can tolerate higher concentrations of lice in the water per day. But that's not the only part of it. The threshold also is related to swimming speed and the distances that smolts travel. So the threshold increases obviously with the size of the smolt that it can tolerate, but it also depends upon the swimming speed. If they're swimming at less than 1 body length per second, the smolt speed is fixed. Sorry, the threshold is fixed because the reduce in contact rate at slower swimming speeds is balanced by the longer time it takes for the smolt to swim through an area. But if they're swimming at more than 1 body length per second, then not only do they swim through the lice an area more quickly, but also their contact rate per second is reduced because the lice have less time to react to the passing smolt. Okay, so I'm just going to illustrate with an example through inshore waters, coastal waters out into the Atlantic Ocean, and taking an example of smolts migrating through Loch Linnhe, which is a long loch with substantial summer aquaculture, and this model is fitted with 2018 to 2020 sea lice counts and the number of fish and farms estimated from consented biomass. So this is the distribution of infectious pressure with the kernel model that is distributed around the coast of Scotland, and we look at 4 scenarios. The fish can enter the upper part of the loch and have to swim the full length, or they can enter somewhere lower down the loch and only swim part of the length. And then when they've reached the island of Mull, they can either continue to swim northwesterly, or they can swim north, which takes them through the Minch Sea, where they may be coming into further contact with lice originating from farms along those coasts. And these are the results of these scenarios. And it's just intended to illustrate how important the smolt migration routes are. The simplest, the least concerning cases when smolts enter in the lower part of the loch and they're only exposed to part of the loch's length. Then even the smallest smolts have contact rates that are below the lower threshold, and therefore below the threshold at which we expect to see mortality or welfare impacts occurring. But the worst case is where they enter the loch at the upper part of the loch and have to swim the full length and then head out north and go through the Minch Sea. In this case, our larger smolts are still below the threshold, but our moderately sized smolts, our typical smolts, are above threshold T1, so we expect some mortality and or welfare impacts. And the smaller smolts are considerably above the T2 threshold, so we would expect considerable mortality to occur in the smaller smolts. Now, this is only intended as a scenario, but what it does illustrate is that concentrations of Copepodids could exceed thresholds given the long time that smolts are required to passage through a longer loch, and this particularly applies to smaller smolts. And coastal water Copepodid concentrations are lower, but they can have an impact on fish that have already been exposed to significant levels in inshore waters. So the model has a big number of limitations, of course. We held a workshop in October last year to look at general what means a requirements for improvement of sea lice dispersal modeling, and there's a poster that we presented here by Maeve. We need more information on the lice impact on the host, and that's what Steve and I will be presenting our work on. We need more information on Copepodid distribution, their swimming behavior, and the work through the spills project that's been mentioned looks at the relationship between lice concentrations on models and on observed sentinel cages, so that will give us more of a handle on infection pressure in Scotland, and therefore something to constrain the swimming. And obviously we want to use more realistic distributions from full hydrodynamic models. We need more information on nopli production, particularly we need information on the numbers of fish on farms, and on particularly we need more information on smolt movements, and there's a lot of work on acoustic tracking, both within sea lochs and at the large scale, looking at the coastal migration. But it's a big ocean, so it's very difficult to get a good handle on smolt migration. And that's me. Just wanted to point out that that there are a number of supporting publications on this, and as I've already mentioned, there'll be a couple of presentations. Well, there has been a presentation by Maeve on the hydrodynamic modeling, and there will be a presentation by Stephen on the thresholds.